folks, we got a pretty cool old project up here on the lift table today. Unless there's another screw in it. Hey, there's another screw in it. A lot of the heavy stuff is all cleaned off the engine. With the muffler being rotted off as it is, a lot of moisture got into there. And here is the final result of the valve flap. See if we can get the point faces cleaned up. And this is a Tillotson model YC1B carburetor. As you can see, it cleaned up really nice in the glass bead blaster. So the next thing I have to do is get this drive system freed up on here. So there's still a lot of heavy grease and buildup on here, but I got the majority of it off to kind of see what the deal is. And it's hard to tell how this shaft goes together. So what I'm going to do is just start disassembling it from either end, and then we'll take it from there. I have a feeling there's a machine land over on this side and it all disassembles that way, but we'll find out soon enough. So I got the gear and the bearing off of this end here, so now I have to figure out how to disassemble this clutch. And looking around the side of it, when I spin it over you'll see it, but there's a pin that you can pull out, and there's a bunch of holes on this faceplate here, and that's how you adjust the tension of the clutch, because this piece right here is threaded. So what I did is I pulled that pin, and I can start to unthread it. And nearest I can figure, this clutch is gonna, I think it's gonna unstack this way like I said. I haven't been able to get this gear on the back to budge yet, but depending on what I find once this comes off, we might have to see if we can get it to move. And this is that pin. It's just a spring-loaded pin that goes into a set of holes. So now that that plate's off, everything should start unstacking out of this clutch assembly. There's one of our clutch plates. That's just bonded clutch material on either side, and then it has a metal plate on the inside with those fingers that grab that drum inside there. And that's one of the metal clutch plates. And we got another fiber clutch plate in behind that with the fingers on it. There's also a lot of mud wasps that get into here and they pack down inside of these grooves. Alright, and that's the end of it right there. Well, as much as I didn't plan on delving this far into this tractor, this clutch definitely had to come apart. As you guys can see, there's quite a bit of rust and old grease and everything inside of there, which is going to keep the clutch plates from moving like they should, so it'll engage and disengage properly. Luckily, there's enough material left on these plates before it gets down to the rivet too, so those are good, or on the clutch discs rather. Plates all look good. Those are going to have to get the rust sanded off of them lightly, get them all shined back up again. And then the main shaft here. So if you guys pull any of these apart, if you end up having one of these Planet Juniors with this style clutch, half of it comes off of this side, on the clutch mechanism side, to pull all the plates and everything off. And then of course the other side is just to get the shaft out. And the mechanism is going to have to get cleaned up. It's got some pretty heavy grease and stuff on it, so I'll get that washed off the best I can. So what I'm going to do is run all this stuff through the parts washer and clean these plates up, and then it'll be all ready to get reassembled properly and put back into adjustment. Clutch assembly is all cleaned up and ready for reassembly. I ran some 400 grit sandpaper over the plates so those shined up nicely, get all the surface rust off of them. All the heavy grease I got off the best I could from everything else. It was pretty darn thick from sitting on there for all these years. And the basket there for the clutch is all cleaned out. All the grease and the oil and everything else is out of that. Alrighty, so we're going to start with reassembly here. So what I am doing now is I got to get some grease and some oil on this shaft here before it goes back into the sprocket. So as you can see here, there's a brass bushing inside of here because that freewheels when this clutch is not engaged. And although brass works out pretty well even when it's dry up against a steel shaft, I'd still rather have some lubricant in there for it to move around on. And you might have seen it too when I was disassembling that there's these seals that I was pulling off. I think one of the bearings had one and then this shaft had one. Those are cork seals that they used back in the day on here. They're not regular oil seals. Alright, so that's our main shaft. And now we can start stacking the clutch assembly on here. Which actually, before I do that, I want to put a very, very light layer of oil on here. One, to keep it from rusting up, and two, just so over time those clutch plates move if they do get a little bit of moisture in there from sitting around. Just make sure that clutch face is degreased with some brake cleaner. And then we just stack them in as they came out. So the first one that goes in is a clutch disc, and then we alternate back and forth between the plates and the clutch discs. until everything's in here. And now that those clutch plates and everything are in there, the actuator assembly has to go on. And that's what activates your clutch. It pushes this disc in here and clamps everything together so that way it transfers power from this gear to the main shaft that goes through it. So what I'm going to do is put a little bit of grease on this threaded portion right here. And we got to put some on the shaft here as well, because this does slide back and forth on it. So that just threads on like so, and then that pin that I showed you guys as it was coming apart, you just have to pull that out and you can finish threading it inwards. And that pin slides into all these holes that you see here, and that's how you set your clutch tension. You can see it cams over on itself, and this will be set initially once it's in the tractor and the engine is running and I can drive it around, and then I can really set the clutch tension and see how much it's going to need, how much pressure is needed in order to get this thing to drive and not have anything slip. Now that the clutch assembly is all together, we can put our bearings back on either end. And as you can see here, this is another one of those cork seals that goes into the end. And then our stanchion presses over that. And then from there, the gear goes on, and that gets pressed onto the shaft. Drive clutch and chains are all set. I ended up oiling up these chains and working them back and forth in the vise for quite a while because they were all pretty well seized up just from all the moisture and everything sitting around over the years outside, and I didn't want to put new chains on it, so I got these working just fine, and now they're all flexible and doing what they should again. So everything's hooked up, and as you can see, rolling this over, our clutch rolls very nicely. And then of course, if you grab the lever up on the handlebars, you can flip that forward and then it locks up the clutch as it should. So what I'm going to end up doing is adjusting that clutch once I get it off here, and I can drive it around and then make sure it has the proper tension on it. Alrighty, so our carburetor and fuel line are both ready to go on. Those have been clear coated a couple days ago and everything dried up fairly nicely. So folks, what I'm going to do is just set the camera up and get this thing wrapped up. The video is getting a little bit long, and I kind of like to get this machine all squared away and get everything going again. So what I'm going to do is get the carburetor remounted on here. I have to get the sheet metal cover for the clutch and the chains all put back on. I have to get a throttle cable on here. I was going to keep the old one with the original casing and put a new cable into it, but it broke on its way out of that cover. So I'm going to put a new one on here, and that'll be all set. And then of course straighten out these handlebars and everything with the torch and get those all squared away as well. the exception of having a new exhaust made for this thing, a new muffler, everything is all set and ready to go, so we're ready to roll this thing out and fire it up and let it run for a little bit. Folks, this is one heck of an endeavor. This took 5 days to do this video on this tractor. Luckily, I'm at a lull here in the wintertime. I worked pretty much 5 full days on this thing to get everything done. It was quite the project and incredibly crusty from sitting outside for all those years. This cultivator did put up a little bit of a fight getting that all freed up. That took a few hours to get it straightened out and everything working and moving again, but I'm happy with the way that turned out because it was pretty well warped. Handlebar is straightened out nicely. I did find out that this is a factory bent handlebar on this side, so that way you can walk beside the furrow or the seed bed or whatever it is that you're doing. I didn't realize that until I saw the crease from the press brake die on the inside of that arm. So that got left the way it is. This arm's straightened out fairly nicely. We got our throttle cable in there, and of course all of our fuel system components and the carburetor and everything are all hooked up. Oil bath air cleaner is awaiting oil until I get this thing running and tuned up. So the only thing I did not do was change the oil in this engine. I'm taking a gamble on it because it's still yellow. It hasn't really been ran that much, and the air cleaner oil, despite having some bugs and crap in it from sitting outside, was still yellow as well. So I have a feeling somebody was keeping up with this tractor up until the time that they parked it. And I'm taking a gamble also that there's not a lot of just nasty black sludge down in the oil pan. So with that, what we're going to do is get this thing rolled off the lift table and get it out into the driveway and fire it up. You can also see that I have a makeshift muffler set up on this, which will be just enough. I don't know if it's going to stay in there. It's just a Briggs muffler that I have wired onto the top. It might be enough to stay in there, it might not, but until I can get a muffler made for this thing that'll kind of keep the noise down a little bit. That was almost too easy. I didn't think it was going to kick over that quick. Well, it took a little bit of adjusting in the carburetor, but it seems like it's running fairly even right now. Unfortunately, when I rebuilt this, I was not able to remove the main jet from the bottom part of the body. It was loose, but it wouldn't thread out. The threads kind of were getting knurled up, and I didn't want to risk it and pull it out of there. So I think it cleaned out okay, but there might still be some junk left in there. But aside from that, folks, I'm pretty darn happy with that. You can't beat it for a a 70 or 80-year-old machine to fire over like that. I didn't think it was going to kick on the first pull, and it did. Now I just got to get that muffler made for it, and this thing will be ready for the shows in the spring. Alright folks, so this was about 2 weeks later from the clip you just saw of me parking this thing up here. Unfortunately, I'm not going to have this muffler done to round out this video. I was hoping to get that finished up, but the sheet metal guy that I use has been pretty busy lately, so he won't have that done for a little bit. So I'm just going to do a cold start of this thing, and then we can get this video wrapped up. It is probably about, I think it's about 20 or so today, if I'm not mistaken, give or take. Hopefully I don't wipe myself out pulling this, because there's an awful lot of ice in front of it here.
So there's one thing that I do have to fix on here. That's the choke return spring for the butterfly right here, because it's not holding the paddle open. It broke when I did the first startup of this, so I gotta take it off and rebend an end on the spring so it'll hook in where it should. So I just got a little bungee cord holding it open right now, which is kind of accounted for making it not start as easily, being able to hold that choke where it should be. Well folks, the Planet Junior Model HT tractor turned out to be a really nice rig, and it's all ready with the exception of that muffler to go to the engine shows this year and the tractor shows in my walk behind tractor collection lineup. I was hoping to have the muffler all produced and put on here for the end of this video, but unfortunately that's not going to be the case, and I wanted to get this stuff wrapped up. So I'm pretty happy with the way this thing turned out, especially because it was pretty much a borderline yard ornament when it came in, when I bought it. It's in pretty tough shape. But this Toro MH engine runs really nice, just idling right along here without an issue. And unfortunately, being the dead of winter too, it would be kind of nice to do a cultivating video for you guys or a plowing video, but that is not going to be the case, at least this time of the year. Well anyways folks, there you have it. That's the repair and startup of the Planet Junior Model HT walk-behind tractor.